Why do we have a movement called Black Lives Matter? All right. Well, let's look at the Great Migration, and perhaps we can find an answer in the historical anxiety that Americans express towards blackness and the involuntary immigrant in general. Now, up to 1920, the Great Migration characterized the black experience in the U.S. There are migrations from the Civil War on through the 1880s. Blacks do migrate from the South to after the Civil War to northern cities. Some people move to Oklahoma, where they form entire towns, Enid, Oklahoma. A significant few arrive here in Los Angeles, where they moved into abandoned Mexican railroad camps, which today form the communities known as Watts and Compton. But before 1914, the percentage of blacks outside of the South is relatively small. Blacks are not included in the growth of industry since white Europeans workers filled the void. Rather, as Africans, they were limited to service sector jobs such as waiters and domestic servants. So the economic demand for labor in the North does not attract blacks to leave the South after the Civil War. Now, by 1914, the change in the economic capacity to generate jobs in the urban North becomes the primary reason for blacks to migrate from the South. World War I created jobs. The rapid expansion of textiles for uniforms, the growth of the steel industry for airplanes and ammunition, and the war industry needed workers. Well, why black workers? Well, first, white males are being recruited to fight the war. 4 million were forced to enlist. Furthermore, the industrial labor force, which was predominantly European at the time, was stymied. When World War I broke out in Europe, Europeans stopped coming to America. And since the labor supply to increase production is a constant in capitalism, especially during war, there was a need for infusion of labor forces from the South. Advertisements proliferated in the South, recruiting black males specifically for wartime jobs. And this recruitment led to the historical experience known as the Great Migration. Now, America has a need to create social control when they perceive racial imbalance. Let's understand this process clearly. Let's go take a look at this map here. And let's bring this map up and let's understand this Great Migration. Now, when black people start moving up into the North and over to the West, and when they do not look like the same people that are of the community. So you think about, again, let's understand the need for social control when there is racial imbalance. Let's understand this process clearly. When too many people who do not look like you take over your community, you react, right? I mean, there's a new people coming in. They don't look like you, they don't talk like you, and they definitely cook food different than you. So as an American, you demand that they conform to your standards or else, right? Now, this is the nativist expression. So you want to implement methods of social control to make sure that the incoming population recognizes boundaries of acceptance. So you see, methods of social control can be applied to any group in any society. Now, one of the reasons why the Ku Klux Klan is going to gain national recognition in 1915, meaning that they had organized chapters in every state of the Union by then, that they move into the North, was that they were organized to make sure that nativism guaranteed white supremacy. The nativism, the nativist character, was spurred on by the KKK to guarantee white privilege. So let's talk about lynching. Why do Southern whites like to make it a holiday occasion to see a black man hanging from a tree? Why do they come out en masse to see a Negro lynched? Now, in the South, after 1865, lynchings became dramatic. In 1889, the Negro Yearbook, kept by the Tuskegee Institute, kept track of lynchings. They recorded 3,700 that year. The peak came in the 1890s when the lynching was recorded every day in a southern state. Lynchings were directed towards the entrepreneurial leadership in the black community. That's why Booker T. Washington came out with the Atlanta Compromise. The Southern white politician liked Booker T. Washington because he didn't protest the hanging of a black man. Economic competition is a major source of violence directed towards the unwanted elements in the community. So students, please remember these images of black, tarred, and feathered when we journey down the road towards appreciating the undocumented worker today. Let's go to a documentary on lynching.
James Allen has collected a photographic record of racial violence in the South. For the past 20 years, he's found horrifying pictures in the family albums of ordinary Southern homes. Many are postcards that were mass-produced as souvenirs.
Some of these images were printed in the tens of thousands and sold for a dime or $1 a piece. Some of the postcards tell you where to write and the discounts you'll get if you buy 1, 10, or 100. They were sold in drugstores and pharmacies. They were sold on the street. I purchased a photograph from a woman. The photographer sold them door to door. Her mother bought the image for $2. A murder that is of particular interest to me was of a 17-year-old boy by the name of Jess Washington in Waco, Texas, in 1916. He was seriously mentally challenged. The wife of the farmer that he worked for was found dead. He was arrested. He was brought to trial. The trial took from 10 until 12. And when the jury came back at noon and found him guilty, someone in the courtroom, and it would have been anyone in the courtroom, screamed out, "Get that nigger." Then one of the worst and cruelest treatments of a human being began. Jess was kicked down out of the courthouse, down the back steps where a crowd of several hundred was waiting. They put a chain on his neck. There were 16,000 people crowding the street to watch this boy be tortured. Jess was tied to the chain over a branch of a tree. The fire was started. They raised Jess from the fire up into the air so that the crowd could see him. There were cheers, like at a football game, cheering the torturers on. When Jess tried to climb up the chain, hand by hand, they cut his fingers off one by one, so that all he could do was slap at the chain. They lowered him back down in the fire. A man came up and castrated him. Another man kept a pole so that he couldn't crawl out of the fire. And time and again they pulled him up to keep him from dying so that the crowd could be satisfied, until he finally died.